Blahnik went to trial, where he admitted stabbing Chris, but claimed he did so in self-defense because he said Chris pulled a gun on them.
I recognize the pain. I can only imagine if my wife, my daughter, did not come home one night.
Beneath the surface of justice lies some of the craziest and most unbelievable sentences in history. From Ryan Stone's chilling crime to David E. Meyer's emotional sentence, these self-defense, reckless criminals treated life like a game. Some fought for freedom, and others faced brutal consequences. Let's begin.
My lawyer told me I made the news in the UK and Australia. If you type in Grand Theft Auto on YouTube, my comes up first.
On a seemingly ordinary morning in March 2014, chaos erupted across multiple cities in Colorado. It all started when 28-year-old Ryan Cole Stone made a reckless decision that would endanger countless lives. What began as a car theft soon turned into a dangerous high-speed chase that stretched across several counties. His actions left a trail of destruction, injuries, and fear. It all started outside a gas station in Longmont. A Ford Focus sat running, unattended, for just a moment. That moment was all Stone needed. Without thinking twice, he jumped into the driver's seat and sped away. But there was something he hadn't expected. A 4-year-old child was still in the car. Instead of stopping, Stone continued his reckless escape. He drove at dangerously high speeds down the highway, weaving in and out of traffic. Before police officers closed in on him, Stone made a shocking move. He crashed the Ford into a minivan on Interstate 76, forcing it to stop, but he didn't stop there. He dragged the driver out of the van by her legs, leaving her helpless on the side of the road. Then he took off in the stolen minivan, continuing his reckless escape.
That since 2003, there's not been a minute of his life where he wasn't on bond, in jail or prison, or on some type of probation.
As he sped through Aurora on the E470 toll road, he caused even more destruction. Near Chambers Road, he hit a state trooper, breaking the officer's leg. But even that didn't slow him down. Stone kept going, crashing into multiple vehicles along the way, his selfish actions putting everyone around him at risk. After 90 minutes of utter mayhem, Stone ultimately exhausted all possible escape routes. He crashed one final time before abandoning the stolen vehicle. Attempting to flee on foot, he quickly realized it was futile. Law enforcement officers from 12 different agencies had been relentlessly pursuing him. Near the intersection of Lincoln Avenue and Peoria Street, Douglas County Sheriff's deputies closed in and apprehended him. His high-speed crime spree had finally come to an end. Stone was arrested and faced serious charges. He was convicted of attempted manslaughter, assault, child maltreatment, and car theft. In court, prosecutors revealed chilling details about his mindset, revealing that he saw his crimes as nothing more than a twisted game. Witness testimonies and evidence showed that he had been obsessed with violent video games, to the point where he began blurring the lines between fiction and reality. While in jail, Stone bragged that he was trying to mimic a video game. He saw it all as a game, but for the innocent people he put in danger, it was real life.
The things where you say over and over and over and over how you wish that you could sit with every single family and tell them how horrible this felt.
The judge didn't take his crimes lightly. Stone was sentenced to 160 years in prison, a sentence that ensured he would never threaten the safety of innocent people again. However, he has no shame for what he did.
DA Mark Horbert described it, the joint prosecution squad between the Boulder and Douglas County DA's offices, with Douglas taking the lead.
Ryan's case demonstrates how a virtual imagination chase nearly cost lives. But our next case shows what happens when the killer is already inside the justice system.
If his conduct has created this conflict, then that is a tough choice for him to make. And ask him, who do you want to represent you?
On March 11, 2005, the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta, Georgia became the scene of a terrifying and deadly escape. Brian Nichols, who was on trial, managed to overpower a sheriff's deputy, steal her gun, and go on a violent killing spree. His actions resulted in the deaths of 4 people, including the judge presiding over his case. After a 26-hour manhunt, Nichols was finally captured. But the city of Atlanta would never forget the chaos he caused. That morning, Brian Nichols was being held at the courthouse for his rape trial. While changing clothes, he attacked Sheriff Deputy Cynthia Hall, beating her into a coma and stealing her service weapon. Now armed and dangerous, Nichols disguised himself in civilian clothes and roamed the courthouse in search of his judge. Inside the courthouse, Nichols encountered case managers Susan Christie and Gina Clark Thomas, along with attorney David Ullman. Holding them at gunpoint, he forced them to lead him to Judge Roland Barnes' chambers. On the way, Sergeant Grantley White attempted to stop him but failed. Nicholas then stormed into the courtroom and fatally shot Judge Barnes and court reporter Julianne Brando. As he fled the courthouse, he also shot and killed Sergeant Hoyt Teasley. After his dramatic escape, Nichols went on a carjacking spree, switching vehicles multiple times. The city was in shock, and law enforcement launched a massive manhunt. Nichols even appeared on America's Most Wanted as authorities worked around the clock to track him down. Later that day, Nichols attempted to kidnap a woman, but her boyfriend fought back, forcing Nichols to flee. That night, he killed ICE Special Agent David G. Wilhelm, stealing his gun, badge, and pickup truck. The murder of a federal agent escalated the urgency of the search. A reward of $65,000 was offered for any information leading to Nichols' capture. On March 12, 2005, Nichols forced his way into the apartment of a young woman named Ashley Smith. Holding her at gunpoint for 7 hours, Nichols revealed his fears and desperation. Smith, showing remarkable courage, spoke to him calmly, shared her struggles, and even read from The Purpose-Driven Life to him. She convinced Nichols to surrender, and after making him breakfast, she was allowed to leave. As soon as she was free, she called the police. Soon after, Nichols was surrounded by law enforcement.
The court and the lawyers appreciate your hard work in this case. At this time, I advise you that I want you to continue your deliberations in this state.
Brian Nichols faced 54 charges, including multiple counts of murder, armed robbery, aggravated assault, and escape. The prosecution sought the death penalty, but Nichols' lawyers argued he was mentally unstable. The jury, however, did not believe his insanity defense. The prosecution even played audio recordings of the murders to show his calculated actions.
Nichols suffers from mental health issues and that on the day of the shooting, he believed he was a slave rebelling against authority.
On November 7, 2008, Nichols was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life without parole and remained expressionless.
I don't know how this case is going to be tried ever.
Already cost the public defender's office some $1.8 million. The state of Georgia cut off funding to the defense team on July 1st.
The case of Brian Nichols shocked the nation. The sheer brutality of his crimes, combined with his ability to evade capture for over a day, left many horrified.
Nichols' parents were also in the gallery. The highly charged atmosphere prompted a stern admonition from Judge James Bodiford to observers.
Our next case shows that some murders stem from greed, which destroys family peace.
Holding a gun to people's head and terrorizing them is not a mistake. It is a crime.
On September 14th, former NFL wide receiver and Super Bowl champion Joe Juravicius was settling in for the night in his home in Gates Mills, Ohio. After dinner with his family, he stepped outside to turn off the lights in his barn, something he had done countless times before, but this night was different. As he entered the barn, Juravicius came face to face with a masked man, armed and dangerous. That man was Robert House, a 24-year-old with a criminal history. At that moment, Juravicius had no idea that the next 30 minutes would change his life forever. House, holding a gun, ordered Juravicius to hand over money and valuables. He even took the gloves that Juravicius had worn during the Super Bowl, gloves that held deep sentimental value. The former NFL player, standing at 6 feet 5 inches, was powerless as House forced him to open his safe and give up whatever he had. But it didn't stop there. House wasn't satisfied with just robbing Juravicius in the barn. He led him towards the house where his wife and children were. As they approached the door, House threatened to shoot. Thinking fast, Juravicius called out to his wife, asking her to bring out all the cash they had. In a desperate attempt to appease the robber, he even offered his Super Bowl ring. But House refused, knowing that selling such a unique item would lead authorities straight to him. Finally, in a split-second decision, Juravicius made a run for it. He dashed inside, locked the door behind him, and grabbed his handgun. He and his family hid, waiting for the police to arrive. This wasn't the first time House had terrorized someone. Just 2 days before, on September 12th, he had broken into the home of a 70-year-old woman. Hiding under her bed, he waited until she entered her room before jumping out and pointing a gun at her. Fortunately, she managed to lock herself in the bathroom before he could harm her. House was already on parole at the time, wearing a GPS ankle monitor due to a previous home invasion. He had served over 5 years in prison for holding 2 15-year-old boys at gunpoint. Police used House's GPS ankle monitor to track his movements, linking him to both crime scenes. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station also captured him discarding stolen items, shortly after the Juravicious robbery. Authorities obtained an arrest warrant, and U.S. Marshals apprehended him at a relative's home 2 days later. When officers arrived, House attempted to flee through the back door, but was quickly tackled and taken into custody. When House was finally arrested, he admitted that the robberies were driven by desperation. He owed $1,500 to a substance dealer who had started threatening his life and the life of his fiancée. During the sentencing hearing, chaos erupted in the courtroom. The judge handed down a 43-year prison sentence, and House reacted with outrage, shouting profanity. His family, furious with the ruling, screamed insults at the judge. Juravicious, however, remained composed. He spoke about the trauma he had endured, not just from this robbery, but throughout his life. He had battled depression and PTSD, suffered physical injuries from his football career, and even experienced the devastating loss of his infant son years ago. However, nothing prepared him for the night he and his family were threatened at gunpoint. As he stood before the court, Juravicious made it clear that he had nothing good to say about Robert House. The man who had terrorized him for 30 minutes had caused damage that would last a lifetime.
That I wore in the Super Bowl when my kid was fighting for his life.
House's fate was sealed that day, and finally, he had to face the consequences of his actions. As for Joe Juravicious, though the scars remain, one thing is certain: he and his family survived. Robert's case shows how a man's life can be consumed by fear. But in our next case, we reveal how a tangled web of deception leads to a chilling murder.
Did you see him stabbing Chris Bagley?
I saw his arm go back. A bunch of times.
On a cold winter night in 2018, 31-year-old Christopher Bagley, a well-known local cannabis advocate, vanished without a trace. His family and friends searched for him desperately, hoping for a miracle. But after months of uncertainty, their worst fears came true. Christopher's body was found buried behind a house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The man responsible for his brutal murder was Johnny Blahnik Church, previously known as Drew Blahnik. As soon as Christopher Bagley was reported missing, authorities launched an extensive investigation. Detectives traced his last known movements and discovered that he had been seen at a residence linked to a local substance activity. Suspicion quickly fell on Blahnik, who was known to associate with dangerous individuals. At his trial in 2021, Blahnik claimed that he had killed Christopher in self-defense. He said Christopher had threatened him with a gun, forcing him to react. However, the evidence told a different story. Prosecutors revealed that Blahnik had stabbed Christopher 13 times in retaliation for a theft from a dealer Blahnik worked for. Afterward, he and another man buried Christopher's body, hiding the crime for months. However, Blahnik was finally convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 57 years in prison. His fight for freedom didn't end there. He appealed his conviction, arguing that he had not received a fair trial. In February 2024, the Iowa Court of Appeals ruled that he deserved a new trial, stating that the judge had pressured a holdout juror to reach a verdict. This decision gave Blahnik and his family hope that he might get another chance to prove his innocence. But on Friday, the Iowa Supreme Court stepped in and overturned the appeals court's decision. The justices ruled unanimously that the judge's actions during jury deliberations were fair and did not violate Blahnik's rights. This meant that his original conviction would stand.
He did it. It was cold-blooded. It was premeditated. It was willful. It was deliberate. It was murder.
Blahnik's lawyer, Leon Spies, was devastated by the ruling. He expressed his disappointment, saying it was difficult to explain to Blahnik and his family why the new trial was taken away. Despite their objections, the Supreme Court's decision was final.
It's typical for us to document the scene of the crime, so I believed it was odd that the victim did not want us to document it.
With the ruling, Blahnik will remain behind bars to serve his full sentence. In addition to his 57-year term for Christopher's murder, he also faces a separate 10-year sentence for brutally assaulting a witness in another case. However, he doesn't show any remorse for his act and said that justice wasn't given by the court. Justice was served by me on December 14th, 2018.
These are the people who have been entrusted to stand up and serve justice in our community. Well, I'm here to tell you, justice wasn't served here in this courtroom because justice was served by me December 14, 2018.
Meanwhile, the other man involved in Christopher's murder, Drew Wagner, played a key role in Christopher's murder, working with Blahnik. Wagner lured Christopher to the house under pretenses, where he was ambushed. While Blahnik fatally stabbed him, Wagner helped restrain him and later assisted in burying the body to cover up the crime. Wagner eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 47 years in prison, proving that Christopher's murder was a planned act of violence, not self-defense. For Christopher's family, the court's decision brought a mix of relief and sadness. They had already lost their loved ones in a terrible act of violence, and the legal battles only prolonged their pain. While no verdict can bring Christopher back, his family hopes that justice will serve as a warning. The next case reveals what happens when some killers never get a chance to correct their mistakes.
I understood their pain. I'll never understand it fully, but I recognize the pain.
On August 12, 2017, an incident took place. At a hearing in a courtroom filled with emotions, Judge William Atkinson faced one of the hardest moments of his career. He had to sentence a man responsible for a tragic accident that took 2 innocent lives. The man, David Meyer, had been driving drunk when he struck and killed a mother and her daughter. The judge, known for his composed demeanor, couldn't hold back his tears as he delivered the sentence. It was a beautiful evening in August when Rebecca Pennenberg and her young daughter, Raylia, set out for a walk in their neighborhood in the town of Lawrence. What was meant to be a peaceful stroll quickly took a shocking turn. Meyer, who was behind the wheel, was heavily intoxicated. His blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit. His reckless decision led to an irreversible loss, leaving a family shattered. David Meyer was caught shortly after the crash when witnesses called police. Police arrived at the scene to find his vehicle wrecked and him visibly intoxicated. A breathalyzer test confirmed his blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit. Surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses showed Meyer's erratic driving before the crash, further solidifying the case against him. Meyer pleaded no contest to 2 felony charges. During the sentencing, Judge Atkinson read letters from the grieving families. The words of sorrow, pain, and loss deeply affected him. He tried to stay strong, but the weight of the tragedy was too much. He acknowledged that no family should have to suffer such a heartbreaking loss. In a rare moment, the judge's voice broke as he imagined similarly losing his wife and daughter. The court sentenced David Meyer to 10 years in prison for his actions. However, the punishment didn't stop there. After serving his time, he would face another 10 years of extended supervision. As part of his condition, he would never be allowed to buy or consume alcohol ever again. Meyer also feels guilty for his act and said, "It is difficult to live with myself for what happened. I promise that I'll live the rest of my life trying to make amends for this."
I just find it difficult to live with myself for what's happened. I can promise that I'll live every day for the rest of my life trying to make amends for...
The decision was meant to bring justice to the Pennenberg family and prevent another tragedy like this from happening in the future. The courtroom was filled with heavy emotions. Family members of the victims wept as they listened to the sentence. Even those who didn't personally know Rebecca and Raylia couldn't help but feel the depth of the loss. Judge Atkinson's emotional response showed that even within the justice system, there are moments that touch the heart. The tragedy of one night's reckless decision served as a painful reminder of the irreversible consequences of drunk driving.
Both were struck by Meyer's car and pronounced dead at the scene. According to the Brown County Sheriff's Office, Meyer's blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit.
Up next, Krista Pike, the youngest woman ever sentenced to death in the U.S. Her disturbing crime shocked the nation. What drove her to commit such brutal violence?
She made me so mad. And I just couldn't with her. And she was just going to leave. So.
In a quiet, unsuspecting town, Krista Pike was a troubled young woman with a dark past. Born in 1976 in West Virginia, her childhood was filled with instability, neglect, and violence. She bounced between homes, experienced mistreatment, and struggled with mental health issues. Despite being a promising student in school, her circumstances led her down a dangerous path. At the age of 18, her life took a horrifying turn when she committed a brutal crime, making her the youngest woman in the United States to be sentenced to death. In 1994, Krista enrolled in the Job Corps program in Knoxville, Tennessee, a government initiative to help low-income youth build a better future. However, instead of using this opportunity to turn her life around, she became involved in a toxic relationship with 17-year-old Tadaryl Shipp. Together, they developed an obsession with the occult and devil worship. During this time, Krista grew jealous of a classmate named Colleen Slemmer, believing that Colleen was trying to steal Tadaryl from her. Despite Colleen's friends denying such claims, Krista's jealousy reached a boiling point. She, Tadaryl, and another friend, Shadola Peterson, plotted to lure Colleen into the woods under the pretense of making peace and offering her substances. On January 12, 1995, the three friends led Colleen to a secluded area near an abandoned steam plant. Once there, Krista and Tadaryl attacked her while Shadola acted as a lookout. For 30 minutes, they taunted and slashed Colleen, even carving a pentagram into her chest. In a final act of cruelty, Krista crushed Colleen's skull with a large chunk of asphalt, killing her. After the murder, she kept a piece of Colleen's skull as a souvenir.
This was probably toward the top of the most gruesome. Every time I hear a young girl disappeared, I think of her.
Krista didn't attempt to conceal her crime. She openly bragged about it, showing off the piece of bone to classmates. It didn't take long for authorities to track her down. The school's sign-out log showed that Krista, Tadaryl, Shadola, and Colleen had left together, but only 3 returned. When the police arrested Krista, they found a piece of skull in her jacket. She confessed quickly, but claimed they only meant to scare Colleen, and things spiraled out of control. Krista's trial was swift, with her confession and overwhelming evidence against her. The jury had little doubt about her guilt.
Robin, Krista Pike has tried on 3 separate occasions on both state and federal levels to get off of death row.
In March 1996, she was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to death for the murder and received an additional 25 years for conspiracy. As the judge delivered the death penalty by electrocution, she broke down in tears, crying uncontrollably.
Can I please have my mom before I go?
Mr. Bates, please hold Miss Pike in the dock.
Please, let me just find my mom.
Please hold Miss Pike in the dock.
I love you.
Tadaryl Shipp, who had played an active role in the killing, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Shadola Peterson, who had cooperated with investigators, received probation. Even behind bars, Krista remained violent and dangerous. In 2001, she attacked another inmate, Patricia Jones, and nearly strangled her to death with a shoelace. In 2012, authorities uncovered an escape plot involving Krista, a prison guard, and a man from New Jersey. The plan was foiled before it could be carried out. Krista has spent years appealing her conviction, but every attempt has failed. In 2020, Tennessee officials requested an execution date, though delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic and legal challenges have postponed it. As of 2024, she remains on death row, awaiting her fate. If executed, she would be the first woman to be put to death in Tennessee in nearly 200 years. This case is heartbreaking on many levels. Colleen Slemmer was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, taken in a senseless act of jealousy and rage. Her family has had to live with the pain of losing her in such a brutal way. But Krista Pike's story is also tragic. Her case serves as a reminder of the consequences of unchecked anger, jealousy, and the influence of toxic relationships. It also highlights the importance of mental health support for at-risk youth, as intervention might have changed Krista's path before it was too late.
You know, I went through hell, to be honest, and it's not right.
There are so many people that love Krista, and Krista wants to live for all of us.
Krista's story reveals how unhealthy relationships can have deadly consequences. But the next case shows obsession and revenge can lead to an equally horrifying fate.
I was arrested at 7.5 months pregnant. Towards the end of the pregnancy, I was housed in the infirmary, and it was terrifying.
In February 2009, 26-year-old Heather Strong disappeared from her workplace in Reddick, Florida. She was a hardworking mother of 2, trying to build a better life for herself and her children. When she didn't come home, her loved ones grew worried and reported her missing. What seemed like a simple disappearance soon turned into a horrifying crime that shocked the entire community. Heather had been in a complicated relationship with her estranged husband, Joshua Fulgham. Their marriage was unstable, and they were battling over custody of their children. During this time, Joshua was also involved with another woman, Amelia Carr. Joshua had once been engaged to Amelia, but he chose to marry Heather instead. Even after his marriage, Joshua kept Amelia in his life, and their relationship remained close.
But I usually got the, I'm gonna kill you, you know, you're a bitch, you're a whore, blah, 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 because me and him had a relationship off and on for the 2 years, almost 2 years.
Jealousy and anger consumed Amelia, especially when she realized that Heather and Joshua were still in contact because of their children. Tensions grew between the two women, and Amelia made no secret of her hatred towards Heather. Meanwhile, Joshua had his motives. He wanted to get rid of Heather and gain full custody of their children. Together, they planned something unthinkable.
About the incident about you grabbing Heather at the house when you were supposed to be babysitting and put the knife to her throat.
He was in jail.
On February 15, 2009, Amelia and Joshua lured Heather to a storage trailer behind Amelia's mother's house, under the pretense of talking things out. Once inside, Heather was ambushed. Amelia tried to break Heather's neck, but when that failed, she placed a plastic bag over her head and taped her to a chair. As Heather struggled for her life, Amelia and Joshua watched as she suffocated.
And through that, and I taped the bottom of Heather's legs off.
After ensuring she was dead, they buried her body in a shallow grave behind the trailer. Days passed, and Heather's family anxiously searched for her. They hoped she was still alive, but deep down, they feared the worst. Their fears became reality when, over a month later, Heather's remains were discovered. The investigation quickly led to Amelia and Joshua. As detectives dug deeper, the horrifying details of the crime came to light. Amelia, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, had not only planned the murder, but had also openly talked about it. Police recorded undercover audio of Amelia discussing the crime with Joshua's sister. She had also given multiple statements to the police, 10 times in total, without an attorney present. Her inconsistent stories raised suspicion, and soon she was arrested. Joshua was arrested separately after being caught using Heather's credit cards. Both were charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. Amelia later claimed that she only confessed to the crime because she wanted to be reunited with her children. However, no one believed her. In December 2010, after just 2.5 hours of deliberation, a jury found Amelia Carr guilty of murder and kidnapping. During her sentencing, her family testified about her troubled past, claiming she had been a victim of mistreatment. However, the jury was not convinced. On February 22, 2011, Amelia was sentenced to death by lethal injection. But still, she believes she is not responsible for the murder.
And then I just went up to her and I was checking her pulse.
The woman you just saw was Amelia Carr.
Joshua Fulgham's trial came a year later in 2012. The prosecution argued that jealousy and revenge had driven him to kill Heather. While the jury agreed he was guilty, they did not sentence him to death. Instead, he received 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Years later in 2017, Amelia's death sentence was overturned, and she was resentenced to life in prison without parole. Heather Strong's murder was a heartbreaking tragedy. She was a young woman who wanted nothing more than to raise her children in peace. Instead, she was betrayed by the people she once trusted. While Amelia and Joshua now spend their lives behind bars, the pain they caused can never be undone. Amelia said she didn't believe it could happen to her. Heather's family continues to mourn their loss, and her children have had to grow up without their mother.
So it's kind of like you're in this shock because you're just like, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. That didn't happen.
Our next case takes brutality to a new level, one that defies all logic and humanity.
While Jimmy was pleading for money from her gravely ill father, that her resentment festered and grew into something dangerous.
On a quiet April evening in 2013, Deltona, Florida became the scene of a chilling crime that seemed straight out of a nightmare. James Schaefer vanished after leaving work, and his disappearance soon took a horrifying turn. Angela Stolt, a 42-year-old woman who often referred to herself as a mortician without a license, was anything but what she claimed. What she did to her neighbor, James Schaefer, would reveal a darkness far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. James Schaefer was a 36-year-old limo driver living just across the street from Stolt. He trusted her enough to let her manage his Social Security disability benefits, but money became an issue between them. Then one night, James vanished. At first, there was no alarm. People come and go. But when he didn't show up for work and friends couldn't reach him, suspicion started to rise.
Always just wanted to help him.
Right.
We tried to get his financial situation straightened out, but he's always stealing money from somebody and needing money for this, that, and the other.
During the investigation, Stolt initially claimed she had financially assisted Schaefer, who was struggling with debt. She alleged that she had loaned him money, but was never repaid. However, as investigators dug deeper, inconsistencies in her story emerged. Schaefer's car was found abandoned, and forensic evidence linked Stolt to the case. Eventually, Stolt admitted to the crime, revealing unsettling details. She confessed to inviting Schaefer to her home, where she gave him alcohol and sleeping pills before attempting to harm him. When her initial attempt failed, she suffocated him. Concerned about being discovered, she went to extreme lengths to conceal what had happened. During questioning, Stolt offered conflicting explanations, at one point claiming self-defense. However, the evidence and her confession indicate who the real culprit is.
First of all, I put my foot like that. I
Okay,
push
go
him
ahead.
back.
You gotta put your foot on my shoulder? Go ahead.
No, I push him back.
Okay, gotcha. Go ahead.
I kind of slid into his lap.
When police uncovered the truth, Angela Stolt was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, mistreating a human body, and tampering with evidence. The details of the trial were deeply unsettling. The jury listened as prosecutors described how she made shocking decisions and even involved her children in inappropriate actions during the aftermath. Angela showed no emotion as the guilty verdict was read. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with additional time for her other crimes.
Are you Angela Face Stolt, ma'am?
Yes. Wesh 2 was there when Angela Stolt made her first appearance in court in April of 2013, accused of murdering and mutilating neighbor James Schaefer.
Angela Stolt's actions left an entire community shaken. Her trial revealed a level of cruelty and deception that few could comprehend. It was a reminder that sometimes the most horrifying crimes don't happen in the shadows, but right next door.
And rammed it into his right eye just to be sure that he was dead. One of the most brutal, gruesome cases.
Side to him, he was a really nice person.
Angela's gruesome crime was something out of a horror movie. But sometimes the most terrifying betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from within your own home.
And although she didn't climb those stairs that horrific evening and use a knife to stab 2 individuals 25 times.
On the night of November 12, 2010, a horrifying crime unfolded in the quiet town of Yale, Michigan. It wasn't the work of a stranger, nor was it a random act of violence. It was a planned attack, masterminded by someone no one would have suspected. Tia Skinner, a teenage girl who plotted against her parents. Tia Skinner had been living what seemed like an ordinary life, but beneath the surface, she was harboring resentment towards her parents. Feeling angry and misunderstood, she decided to take matters into her own hands in the most unthinkable way. Instead of rebelling like a typical teenager, she planned a brutal attack on her family. One night, while her parents, Paul and Meyer Skinner, were sleeping peacefully in their home, 2 men armed with knives broke in. Paul, Tia's father, woke up and fought desperately to protect his family. He managed to chase the attackers out of the house, but collapsed soon after. Catastrophically, his wounds were too severe, and he did not survive. Meanwhile, Tia's mother, Mara, was left critically injured, but miraculously survived.
And I lifted my head and looked toward where his voice was, because it was dark in our room. And at that moment, I realized that I was being attacked, and he was being attacked.
At first, the attack seemed like a break-in gone wrong. However, as detectives dug deeper, shocking evidence pointed to Tia, revealing that she had orchestrated the entire crime. Investigators uncovered a detailed map of the house and neighborhood, drawn by Tia herself, to help the attackers navigate their way. The ultimate betrayal was Tia's active involvement. Text messages between her and the attackers revealed that she had multiple opportunities to stop the crime, but chose not to. Instead, she encouraged it, ensuring her parents would suffer. She even left weapons ready for the attackers, cut the window screen for easy access, and provided a stepladder to make their entry effortless. The 2 men, Jonathan Kurtz and James Preston, were both over 18 and were sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Any indications that there was anything amiss?
And there were no questions from her or requests for information?
None.
In August 2011, Tia Skinner stood trial. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The jury found her guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole, but Tia shows no guilt for her actions.
Tia Skinner's demeanor was indifferent following the attack. She interviewed her for nearly 90 minutes at the Richmond Post.
However, her case didn't end there. Over the years, legal debates about whether juveniles should receive life sentences without parole kept bringing her case back to court. The Michigan Supreme Court ultimately ruled that judges could impose life sentences in such cases. As a result, Judge Daniel Kelly sentenced Tia to life in prison without parole, 3 times, each time following new legal rulings on juvenile lifers. Tia's case became an important legal benchmark, influencing how courts handle juvenile offenders involved in violent crimes. Many other cases of juvenile lifers were put on hold, waiting for the outcome of their sentencing. Prosecutors viewed the ruling as a victory for victims and their families, ensuring justice wasn't lost in debates over juvenile sentencing laws. The story of Tia Skinner serves as a chilling reminder that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. A daughter turning against her parents in such a cruel and calculated way is a nightmare no family should ever have to endure. The next case will shock you to your core because the victim was an innocent child.
You savagely beat your child to the edge of death. For this you must be punished.
On an unsuspecting day in 2011, something horrifying happened inside a Texas home. A 2-year-old girl was brutally treated by the person who was supposed to love and protect her, her mother, Elizabeth Escalona. Elizabeth was just 23 years old at the time. She had 3 children, but being a mother didn't stop her from making terrible choices. She struggled with substances, had a history of mistreatment, and often lost her temper. But no one could have imagined the cruelty she would unleash on her little daughter over something as simple as learning to use the bathroom. That day, Elizabeth became frustrated with her daughter for not using the bathroom correctly. Instead of helping or teaching her, she snapped. She treated the little girl very badly, pushing her and using a milk jug in a hurtful way. And as if that wasn't enough, she did something very upsetting. She stuck the toddler's hands to the wall with glue. By the time emergency responders arrived, the child was barely alive. She had been treated so harshly that she became very ill and unconscious. When the case went to trial, the courtroom was filled with heartache. Prosecutors showed disturbing pictures of the little girl's injuries. They turned to Elizabeth and asked her if she was a monster. With tears in her eyes, she nodded and whispered yes. But no amount of regret could undo what she had done. The judge, Larry Mitchell, listened to the painful testimonies and made his decision. He told her, "You savagely beat your child to the edge of death." During the trial, Elizabeth begged for mercy. She claimed that she had suffered mistreatment as a child and didn't know what she was doing. But the prosecutors weren't convinced. They pointed out that she had been using substances since she was 13, even while pregnant, and continued to drink and do substances while out on bond for a previous felony.
Counsel, is there any reason in law why sentence should not be pronounced at this time?
The judge sentenced her to 99 years in prison as soon as the verdict was read. She starts screaming. Her sentencing was harsh, but many believed it was fair. Her children are now in the custody of the state, safe from harm.
You're guilty of the offense charged. I'll set your sentence at confinement in the penitentiary for a period of 99 years.
This case stunned the masses. How could a mother do something so cruel to her child? It was a reminder of how important it is to protect children from mistreatment. Thankfully, this little girl survived. But the scars, both physical and emotional, will remain for a lifetime.
A child who never developed, who never had a childhood. So no, she's not able.
Up next, Andrea Belser. A shocking case of betrayal as a seemingly ordinary teenager committed an unthinkable act against her own family.
This question would be, I snapped. I took my little K bar there and planted it straight into my mother's back. And then...
On Halloween night, October 31st, 2016, Winthrop, Maine experienced one of the most horrifying crimes in its history. 17-year-old Andrea Belser made a chilling 911 call, confessing to stabbing her parents to death. Initially, she told the dispatcher she had snapped, citing struggles with gender identity and acceptance. In a moment of rage, she took the lives of the very people who had raised her. Andrea's story was both shocking and heartbreaking. That night, she made a devastating choice that changed everything. While hugging her mother, she suddenly pulled out a knife and stabbed her. Her father, awakened by the screams, rushed to help, only for Andrea to turn on him as well. A military-style knife was later found near his body. The tragedy didn't end there. She also killed the family's small pet. However, when her older brother, Christopher, stood before her, she spared him, saying, "It's not your day." When the police arrived, they expected to find someone in distress, but Andrea remained calm. As she spoke to detectives, she even laughed while recounting the events. Her lack of remorse was deeply unsettling.
Kind of quickly beaten out of me, you know?
Andrea later claimed she had struggled with gender identity and felt her parents didn't support her. She also alleged that her mother had been mistreated. However, her family strongly denied these claims. Her uncle, Carl Pierce, insisted that Andrea's parents were loving and supportive. He called her accusations an insult to their family, stating that nothing could justify the horrific crime she had committed.
I told them what I wanted to be, you know. I say I I question my identity. That's
Christopher, Andrea's older brother, struggled to understand her actions and could not forgive her. In a heartfelt statement, he said, "I still hear our mother's screams every night. She was stabbed by the son who loved her so much. You are an inhuman creature." His words were filled with pain and sorrow as he recalled the horrific events that took their parents' lives. Andrea pleaded guilty in hopes of receiving a lesser sentence. The judge acknowledged her struggles with gender identity, but emphasized that personal challenges could never justify such violence. Ultimately, she was sentenced to 40 years in prison. As the sentence was read, she began to cry.
My entire support system was destroyed, and what was left was an extended family that did their best to make sure I was safe and healthy, but couldn't replace what I've lost.
Though tragic, the crime could not be excused by its underlying reasons. The court acknowledged Andrea's age and past, but emphasized accountability. Christopher, now orphaned, struggled with the weight of his sister's actions, while Andrea faced the lifelong consequences of her choice.
Keeping Mr. Balser in the juvenile system would greatly diminish the gravity of this offense. This is an incredibly heinous murder of his parents, and keeping him in that system would diminish that offense greatly.
The community was shaken, a family shattered. While Andrea pleaded for forgiveness, her surviving relatives couldn't grant it. Some saw a troubled teen acting out of pain, others a remorseless killer. Up next, Denali Bremer, a disturbing case where manipulation and greed led to a chilling crime that shocked everyone involved.
She was 19 years old and developmentally disabled. Investigators say she was killed because of an online scheme. A man they had never met promised millions of dollars to murder someone.
He was very matter-of-fact about the whole thing, almost glib. When he told me about shooting Cynthia in the head and kicking her body into the water, he laughed. And I will never in my life forget that.
In Alaska's remote wilderness, a sinister betrayal unfolded. Cynthia Hoffman, a kind-hearted 19-year-old, believed that she was on a simple hiking trip with friends. Instead, she walked into a calculated trap, one that would end her life in a chilling and senseless murder.
It all began with a bizarre online catfishing scheme.
Darren Schillmiller posed as a millionaire online, offering $9 million to, quote, rape and murder someone in Alaska.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it.
Cynthia Hoffman was blissfully unaware. The 18-year-old she considered her best friend had targeted her in a murder plot. Her uncle Don Hoffman says that was characteristic of her trusting nature and naivete.
Denali Bremer, then 18, was lured into a dark web of manipulation by an online predator. The man, posing as a wealthy millionaire named Tyler, promised her $9 million in exchange for video evidence of a murder. Blinded by greed and eager to please her catfish, Denali began plotting a crime so heinous it shocked even seasoned investigators. To carry out the plan, she recruited 2 accomplices, including 16-year-old Caden McIntosh, and chose Cynthia Hoffman, her best friend, as the target. Cynthia, who had developmental disabilities, trusted Denali completely. That trust was heartlessly exploited. On June 2, 2019, Denali lured Cynthia on a hike near the Eklutna River under the influence of a fun outing. But for Denali and her accomplices, it was the perfect setting for murder.
The plot to murder Hoffman began when Denali Bremer began an online relationship with a man calling himself Tyler and claimed to be a millionaire. But Tyler was really 21-year-old Darren Schillmiller. He told Bremer if she murdered someone and sent him photos and videos of it, then he would give her $9 million. The teens lured Hoffman to Thunderbird Falls trailhead for a hike. McIntosh shot her in the head and put her body in the river. One day after she went missing, her body was found bound with duct tape.
The betrayal came swiftly. Once on the trail, Cynthia was ambushed. The group duct-taped her hands and feet, rendering her defenseless. As she begged for her life, Caden McIntosh shot her in the back of the head with a handgun provided by Denali. Denali documented the entire crime, capturing photos and videos that she sent to Tyler as proof. The group then discarded Cynthia's body in a river, leaving her to be discovered by authorities days later. What makes this crime even more shocking? Tyler wasn't real. He was Darren Schillmiller, a 21-year-old from Indiana who had catfished Denali, preying on her vulnerability to orchestrate the crime from afar. The investigation moved quickly. Cynthia's family reported her missing, and police soon uncovered the group's twisted plan through text messages, social media exchanges, and incriminating footage. Denali's cold confession during questioning left detectives stunned.
I know what I did was wrong, and I know I could have probably done something different if I was able to.
Late this afternoon, a 23-year-old woman has received a 99-year prison sentence for her role in the 2019 murder of Cynthia Hoffman near Thunderbird Falls. Lauren Maxwell just out of the courtroom.
Denali Bremer was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and tampering with evidence. In court, she admitted to the crimes and expressed regret, but the damage was irreparable. She was sentenced to 99 years in prison without parole, ensuring she spent the rest of her life behind bars.
The only thing I know is that my daughter trusted these people. My daughter just wanted friends. Now I have to bury her.
She was a very smart, bright, vibrant young lady. She loved life. She loved music. She liked shopping, just regular kid stuff.
The courtroom was heavy with grief as Cynthia's family confronted Denali. Her father described Cynthia as an innocent, trusting soul whose kindness was cruelly taken advantage of. He called the crime unforgivable and a tragic reminder of the dangers of online manipulation.
The hurt I caused you and your family, I can never rectify in any way. I understand it hurts. You lost a precious child, and the community lost a daughter as well.
Denali, for her part, broke down during sentencing, but her tears did little to comfort those she had devastated. Her calculated actions and the gruesome details of Cynthia's murder left the courtroom speechless. Denali's case wasn't just a story of manipulation. It was a cautionary tale of how easily trust can be weaponized. Cynthia Hoffman's life was stolen in an act of pure betrayal, and the devastating loss is a wound that her loved ones will carry forever. Denali may spend the rest of her life behind bars, but for Cynthia's family, justice will never bring true closure. These chilling cases show how justice can take many forms. Sometimes it brings closure, and other times it leaves people questioning the system. These cases show how unpredictable the legal world can be. In our next video on screen, we'll dive into more chilling cases that stunned the world.